Good evening. How wonderful to see you here. My name is Jane Duncan, and I'm the president of the RIBA. Welcome. Welcome all to our celebration of the award of the 2017 Royal Gold Medal to Paulo Mendes da Rocha. Okay, forgive me for this. Boa noite e bem-vindos. É maravilhoso hospedar a Dom
It's
Paulo
welcome
e
to
Dona Helena
receive
na RIBA.
Paulo and Helena here at the RIBA.
I was coached for 6 weeks to do that. I would also like to extend a special welcome to His Excellency Eduardo dos Santos, the Ambassador of Brazil, and his guests, Ana Maria Berenbach, the Deputy Head of the Embassy, and Haile Gadea, the Cultural Attaché, and his guest, Ana Paula Pacheco. Welcome. This week, in all parts of the UK, the RIBA is celebrating the achievements and contributions to architecture of our new and existing fellows, both international and honorary. We've heard some brilliant presentations, and last night enjoyed a fantastic address by Peter St. John, the winner of last year's Sterling Prize for the wonderful Newport Street Gallery. And tonight, we celebrate and hear from our Royal Gold Medalist, Paulo Mendes da Rocha, whose name you may have noticed on the way in is now carved in stone here at Portland Place, alongside the 164 past recipients of the Royal Gold Medal, which was first presented in 1848. Tonight, of course, is all about our 165th recipient. Along with Peter Cook, Sheila O'Donnell, Neil Gillespie, and Victoria Thornton, I had the pleasure and privilege of chairing the Honours Committee for the 2017 nominations. Of course, selecting a recipient of the Royal Gold Medal is at once a daunting but also an immensely rewarding task. The challenge and joy of immersing oneself in studying and reflecting upon the work of some of the greatest architects of our time is fascinating, humbling, and hugely inspiring. Paulo's candidacy for the Royal Gold Medal was brilliantly championed by, amongst others, John McCaslin and Neil Gillespie, who are both here. If you will permit me, I would like to quote you, Neil. His work has a courage and clarity that few can match. His structures are daring and joyous. His use of concrete, bold and innovative. His plans at a building scale or at a city scale are generous and expansive. He is passionate about people and society and how his buildings might serve them. These remarkable qualities are present even in his earliest works. There is a quality to his work that renders it timeless. For many, he represents one of the last great figures in architecture, whose work, while serving society, has a poetic dimension that delves deeply into our architectural discipline. And from John McCaslin, who supported Neil's nomination, his architecture resists summary, but it very often counterpoises massive concrete formal elements with a relatively delicate transition of points of structure. This in itself is not uncommon, but the way da Rocha assembles the pieces in the geometry of his buildings remains unique. His engineering intelligence has always equaled his formal originality. Paulo Mendes da Rocha's particular genius may have originated in the 1950s, but he unquestionably remains an architect, and specifically not a starchitect, for our own times. This is surely the essential mark of his greatness. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have simultaneous translation of Paulo's lecture. Each of you, I hope, will have your headset and a small black box, which is the receiver. If you do find that you have a problem with either the black box or the receiver, please put your hand up and a member of our team will come and find you and hopefully sort you out. We can only deal with problems of receivers, not in your personal lives there. Make sure the receiver's switched on by pressing the silver button and that the headset is connected. To listen to Paulo's lecture in English, make sure the channel is set to position 1 by using the rocker switch on the right-hand side. The volume control is on the left-hand side. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor, my great privilege to welcome Paulo Mendes da Rocha.
Primeira coisa que eu quero dizer
First of all,
é que nos sentimos
I'd
todos
like to say that
arquitetos
we all feel like
brasileiros.
architects and we all feel
muito
Brazilians today. It's a great honor,
muito felizes
and we are very, very happy
por essa magnífica
for
instituição.
being here, for being hosted by the RIBA here.
Aos meus amigos,
To my friends,
a todos vocês,
to all of you,
colegas,
my colleagues,
com licença para o senhor embaixador, muito
His
particularmente,
Excellency,
a licença
the
para a senhora
Ambassador,
Duca,
and
presidente
Jane
dessa
Duncan
instituição,
as well.
os meus mais respeitosos
And
cumprimentos,
I give you my sincere thanks
afetuosos
and very humble
abraços e aproximações.
hugs with this encounter.
O que eu tenho a dizer é
What I have to
muito pouco
say
mais por
is
constrangimento
very
numa situação
little,
como essa,
and it's very
diante de
difficult
tanta
in such a
sabedoria,
situation
de estarmos
before
aqui.
so
Mais
much
uma vez,
knowledge.
dizer que,
Once again,
entretanto,
I'd like to say that
não tenho
although
nenhum escrúpulo
I
de não ser modesto, e
may
mais uma
not
vez
be
afirmar que estou
humble,
muito feliz
and
com
I
tudo isso.
say again,
Porque
I
são
reiterate,
formas
I'm very, very happy
ver que o
because
nosso trabalho,
it's a
de
way
algum
to
modo,
see
o
that
trabalho do
my
indivíduo,
work, our
pode
work, the
ter
individual's
uma
work,
importância muito
can
grande
have a very
nas
great
coisas que os homens
importance
querem fazer
in
em
everything that
dimensões muito
mankind, men
que seja o
want
que
to
está hoje
achieve in
construído
larger
para todos
dimensions,
nós,
which
uma
is
política de sustentação
seeing
da vida
before
do homem
us
no
this
universo, no planeta,
policy of
principalmente.
sustaining
Tudo que se
life
fala
of
de
man in the
natureza,
universe, everything we say about nature
para
and all these
fazer
issues.
justiça a esse
In
momento
order
e
to
cumprir
be fair
formalidades,
to this
o senhor tem que
moment
fazer uma
and
coisa.
follow all formalities,
Vou mostrar
I will show you
alguma coisa que talvez
some
tenha movido de forma
examples
constante desde que eu
that
comecei
may have
a
evolved since
pensar,
I began
antes
to
de pensar como
think
arquiteto e muito
before
mais depois
I
como
was an architect,
a
and
respeito
even
da
more
questão
when I became an
fundamental
architect.
de construir
This
o habitat
fundamental
humano
question
na
of
natureza,
building human
porque por
habitat
si mesmo
in
ela,
nature,
in
because
natura,
in itself,
pura, não é
pure in its
habitável.
format, it's not habitable by
Hoje
man.
podemos dizer,
And nowadays we can
de
say,
modo, digamos, entre nós,
amongst
com
us
todo
here,
respeito e pudor,
with all due
sem nenhuma
respect,
intenção de fazer
without
graça
any
aqui.
intentions to make
Entretanto,
any
a
jokes,
natureza em si,
nature
estrito
in
senso, é
itself,
inferno.
it's
Um
hell.
conjunto de fenômenos
It's an equivalent to an
absolutamente
inferno,
incontroláveis.
to
O
hell.
planeta não é
We
estável.
have
A
an
superfície da Terra
unstable
onde vivemos é uma
planet.
pequena
The
casca em
surface
cima
where we live is
de
just
algo
a shell,
fundente que é o
and we
interior
have this
da matéria
burning
do planeta.
insides
O planeta mesmo
in the
não é outra
planet.
coisa
The
senão
planet
pequeno
in
calhau
itself is just a
perdido,
little rock,
flutuando no
lost,
universo,
floating in
submetido às leis
space,
da mecânica
submitted
celeste e
to
principalmente
mechanical physics laws, and
a
mainly
consciência sobre
the
isso
consciousness,
hoje
the
é
awareness.
universal, ninguém mais
We have this
discute.
universal
Sabe que
knowledge
isso está, assim,
on these
coisa que não se
issues.
sabia,
We
principalmente nós
know
americanos,
all
que
that
podemos
because
dizer,
us from
há
the
500
Americas,
anos
we can
atrás,
say 500 years ago, it was just
o senhor
yesterday,
Galileu, que dizia mais ou
Galileu,
menos que as coisas
who
seriam
said
assim,
more or less that
estava
things
condenado
worked
à fogueira
in that manner, he
em
was
praça pública,
burnt.
ou seja, Estamos
in front
vivendo
of
uma grande
everybody in a
revolução
public square. Therefore,
amparada
we're going through a
sobre a questão do
revolution
conhecimento.
supported by
Portanto, a
knowledge.
construção do
The
habitat humano, ou
construction
seja, a
of
cidade,
human
uma outra
habitats, cities,
situação em que o homem
this
possa viver,
situation,
senão uma cidade,
scenarios
é a
where
grande
men can
questão
live. So this is the
que a arquitetura
greatest
discute.
question mark
Isso tem
that
muito valor
architecture
se pensarmos
discusses,
que,
and this has
do
great
ponto de
value
vista de uma
if we
revisão
think
dos
that
erros e acertos
when
da
reviewing
humanidade,
our successes, our mistakes in mankind's
podíamos
history,
imaginar
we
que aquilo
could
que estamos mesmo
imagine
vivendo
that what we are
atualmente é
living,
uma revisão
experiencing
crítica no
currently is a
sentido
critical
construtivo,
view in
não
a
no sentido
constructive
negativo da palavra crítica,
meaning,
mas
not
uma
being
revisão
critical
crítica
per se, but
do
it's
que
a
chamamos
critical
uma
review
política colonial,
of what we call
que foi naturalmente o que
colonialism,
incidiu sobre a América.
which was imposed
Portanto, a
on the
experiência
Americas.
americana, que é uma
Therefore,
experiência, sem
the
dúvida,
experience of
que
the
teria que ser a
Americas,
experiência
which
brasileira, tem uma
has
importância
reflected
muito
in the
grande
Brazilian
nisso que chamamos a
experience, it has
arquitetura,
great
o
importance
conhecimento ocidental,
on what we call Western
cultura
knowledge,
ocidental.
this Western
Que
culture.
notícias pode
What
trazer um
news
americano
can
para o
I,
debate hoje?
South
Nós
American
somos,
and American, I
eu
can
imaginava
bring
que
to this
fosse
debate?
interessante sermos
I thought it would be
enquanto
very
brasileiros,
interesting as a
alguém,
Brazilian national.
de nós, eu,
One
no
of us,
caso,
I,
agora,
in this case
que
here,
traz as
I am
últimas notícias
bringing the latest
da
news
América,
from
as últimas
the
notícias do
Americas.
front, como
So the
disse
news from the
o curador da
front,
última Bienal
as
de
the
Veneza.
curator of the last
Porque
Venice Biennial has
hoje
mentioned,
essa luta
because
é
now
universal.
this is a
O mundo
universal
sabe que
fight.
estamos diante
The
desse problema.
world knows
O que fazer
we are facing
que não
these
fizemos bem
issues.
feito? Ao
What
contrário,
have we
fizemos
done
muito mal
that
feito.
we
Estamos
haven't
vivendo
achieved as
ainda
a success,
consequências da última
and we are
grande,
suffering from
horrível,
consequences
episódios
from
de
the
guerra do
last
século
wars
XX,
in the 20th
tentando
century,
nos
and we are
aproximar de um modo
trying
difícil, ou
to
seja,
come
a
much
dimensão
closer
política
to
da
this
arquitetura
political
como forma
dimension
peculiar de
of
conhecimento,
architecture as a
peculiar ao
very
gênero humano,
peculiar
desde
form of
das
knowledge
suas origens,
from its
arquitetura. Tem uma
origins.
importância
It
muito
has a
enorme
great
nessa
importance
revolução atual,
in this
no processo
revolution,
da revolução
in this
atual, da política
process,
do que chamamos
in
uma revolução
politics
atual,
of this current
revolucionária, inclusive,
revolution.
mais do que nunca,
And
por ser mundial.
it's
Não é
revolutionary
mais uma
because
questão
it's global.
da América, nem dos países
It's
é uma
not
questão
just in the
de todos
Americas,
nós, essa
it's an
revisão
issue that
crítica da
encompasses
política colonial
all
para
of us.
juntos
This
podermos
critical view of
pensar
colonialism, so together we can
algum
think
projeto
about
para o
the
futuro.
future and
Sabemos, por
a vision for
experiência,
the
que não
future.
podemos nunca
We know
dizer
that
como
we
as coisas
shouldn't
terão
say how
necessariamente que ser
things
feitas, ou seja,
will have to
nunca
be done.
podemos ter
We
certeza
shouldn't be
que
absolutely
exatamente
sure
vamos fazer.
of
Estamos
what
sempre
we are going to do. We are
Porém,
always trying,
experimentando dentro
experimenting,
de um
experimenting
raciocínio
within
que diz que,
this
entretanto,
rationale,
sabe-se
saying that
perfeitamente
we
o que
know
não
very
fazer.
well what we
O que pode
shouldn't
ser
do,
erro,
what
é
could
possível prever
create a
antes.
mistake. We can
Essa experiência é uma experiência
forecast
americana,
our
sem dúvida,
mistakes,
muito
we can
interessante.
preview
E
them. So this is a very
enquanto
interesting experience
experiência americana, que é o
from
que nós
the
pretendemos, mais
Americas,
ou menos,
and that's what
trazer,
we are trying,
sobre
that's what
o
I
que
am trying
pretendemos trazer
to
alguma notícia.
bring to
Inclusive
you
eu
as this
receber desse
form of
prêmio com o meu
news,
trabalho.
and including
É uma
myself
experimentação
receiving
como
this award.
transformar
It's an
o
experimentation in how to
em algo
transform
mais
space
propício
into
do ponto de
something
vista
more timely
habitabilidade,
in terms of
do nosso planeta.
how to
As
inhabit
questões são
our
muito
planet.
amplas,
These are
envolvem,
very
inclusive,
broad issues
superpopulação,
involving
envolve
overpopulation,
controle da natividade, por exemplo, que afeta
birth
todo o
control,
universo
everything
da
that
sexualidade.
affects
São
sexuality.
coisas imensas,
They are broad
universos
issues.
enormes
They are
daquilo
very
que é o
broad
indivíduo, uma
dimensions
mentalidade.
of the individual
Portanto,
as a
individual.
mentality,
Portanto, a
an
nossa
individual
questão é a
mentality.
cidade contemporânea.
Therefore, our
Com
main
isso,
issue is to focus
para
on
abordar,
contemporary
inclusive,
cities. And in order to
a
approach
contradição entre
this contradiction
amplos
between
horizontes
very
de
broad
problemas
horizons
e
presented by
tão
these problems
estrito,
and
pequeno,
very
recurso
strict,
que uma
very
obra, seja um
small
poema,
resources.
seja uma
So
dança,
a body of
seja uma
work can be a
sinfonia,
dance,
seja
a
uma obra de
symphony,
arquitetura, pode ter
architectural
nesse
work.
universo
And they can mean so much in this universe. In Latin America, as a Brazilian, what I can say is that we've got a view, for instance, this criticism to colonialism is how areas are occupied. So countries located in Latin America is just, we can see this arbitrarity. So Chile is there, Brazil is there, Uruguay, they're all positioned in an erratic manner. And within these erratic forms, we can think this very rich space area. We have the large rivers, River Paraná, Uruguay, the Plata Basin, the Amazon Basin, all these engineering projects that in Brazil we have dreamt about, and we've tried to connect the Uruguay Basin with the Amazon Basin. So this connection of all these rivers in order to navigate them with Paraná and Uruguay to the Silver River Basin. So it would be like a hinterland coast for river navigation. This would be the key, the main point of possible progress in large areas, as we can see the navigation of Mississippi River and Ruhr as well in North America, the Volga Dome in the Soviet Union. We haven't been able to achieve that. We should plan the territory in a more broad manner. However, it would be important to have this operation in order to bring countries together, because some rivers, they are born in one country and the river mouth is in a different country. So we could link countries together in order to bring peace to Latin America as well. Not even mentioning the Atlantic and the Pacific. They've never been connected. And once again, we should work together with several countries for these works, to have these means to connect these sites, and also railways to connect these possible ports. And in the whole territory, we would have the need and the possibility together to make it possible river navigation and connection between the Atlantic and the Pacific. All the cities and new cities that could be born from these expansions. We would have new port cities and river cities. And we wouldn't have experienced urban disasters. They wouldn't need to exist. So this is a position of architecture today. So cities with 20 million people, that has occurred because people needed to migrate to find work. It was lack of planning and a very opportunistic attempt, which is a feature of colonialism, which has nothing to do with the former colonial countries. Today, it's a global issue. France, which faces issues with Algeria, Spain, which faces issues with Morocco as well, and Holland, the Netherlands, Borneo, Sumatra. This issue is very broad. What we can do in order to manage the planet together, in order to have a promising future that can really foster creativity, and we can think about music, poetry, architecture, understanding before anything else that architecture is a form of discourse on knowledge, and understanding the importance, the growing importance of architecture as a school, as a discipline, as part of the university, because architecture cannot have encompass all knowledge. It's impossible for someone to know engineering, philosophy, or humanity disciplines. everything that is taken into consideration when one is creating a project. What we need to imagine is that architecture by itself is a peculiar form of knowledge which can influence and intervene and direct all the university teachings, and maybe it might be the most important degree in university in the future. Therefore, we need to review education policies and teaching policies from a very early stage of education. And with all these ideas, perhaps extraordinary, we could try to build a house, a very simple building, and inside this building you have all this discourse. Now I will show you a few projects with a presumption, if I may be able to say, because they may contain dealing with simple issues. Everything more or less what we've discussed so far. And I wanted to show some projects in these images. Can you please show my PowerPoint? I've brought my PowerPoint. Could you please, is it from here that I control? Yes? This is the Montividiu Bay. This is a very interesting city called Tietê City in the state of São Paulo. Why? This river, you can see to the left with the Atlantic at 700 meters high, and it runs west towards the Atlantic, and it meets Paraná River in the Plata Basin in Argentina. If you can imagine that they built a road, a motorway, with a collaboration with England in the railway system, and one to the south of Tietê River, which has never been used for navigation. Now there are some dams, and it is possible to navigate the river with these locks, and we can join railway system with a rail line crossing water dam, creating a system that would connect the previous communication system in order to have cargo and useful logistics with a river port, which would be located 400 kilometers from São Paulo, from Rio Paraná, and halfway through 500 kilometers. It's the ideal distance to have jet flights and fly between São Paulo and Rio. Therefore, it's a very strategic location to have a city to connect all these systems. Therefore, architecture is capable to make even more virtuous an existing system with a small intervention and this intelligence to understand the space, the desired space in a logic manner, understanding the current situation men are experiencing. So this is a virtual city I've created, and this is the scheme. It's a very simple city with a horizontal line of 20 kilometers to have mass transport with all buildings, management buildings. It would be a city for 500,000 inhabitants, reaching 1 million inhabitants. It's a very interesting proposal. On the other side, we have an airport and a river port for heavy duty and heavy loads. And we've got the domestic port on the other side, and on the other place we have located a university to deal with polytechnic subjects and so forth and so on, with striking importance to what we knew and some interventions as well highlighted. We've got a maritime base as well, a hub for parks, a botanical park or a nature park, and on the other extreme to the right, we have this advanced hub for the Polytechnic and Sciences Maritime School. In the city center, it crosses what they call in Portugal a dam, a reservoir. It flows to the river, so the city works in a horizontal manner, and all the sections that go towards the valley, the lower valleys, they've got gardens and green areas, and in the city would have theater, museums, and entertainment. So this is a very interesting scheme. It's a sculpture in iron with all these buildings I've just described to you. And here we have Montividiu Bay. It's a city built around a bay that we could imagine as circular.
But if we were to imagine spaces that were circular, a circle of about 2.5 kilometers. If you know São Paulo, for those of you who know São Paulo, it's the size of Avenida Paulista, Paulista Avenue, because size is very important for the rationale of architecture. It's not just an abstract scale. What matters is the real size of something. So in this case of this bay, of 2.5 kilometers, we can see that the plan that is developed of an avenue that goes around the bay and cuts all the interior and the access to these waters, and also the inconveniency of this bay. Now the architect can see this as a virtue and not an inconvenience, because the bay is very shallow, about 2.5 meters only of depth. Only the right side is dredged for the city. With if you have boats for passengers, like in Portugal, that takes people from places, and for example in Rio that we have the ferry boats that takes people from Niterói. This could be perfectly developed here. This kind of navigation could be in these waters that are now virtuous, if we did it in the following way, transforming the bay in a square plaza with vertical walls and with the material of the dredging of the bay. You could have extended plans that we could have the hotels, the bars, maybe a school, etc. And the bay would be intensively navigable as a new form of transport. And this is very much desired nowadays, such as the individual transport of cars. This is a vision of capable architecture, of a architecture capable to say, I wouldn't have to do anything else if this project would be carried out. That would be the essence of architecture, is to know what to do and what can be done in one way or the other. And I'm not ashamed to show this little detail. And if you see something in the middle of the bay, those are 3 or 4 stones, which is not necessarily an island, but could be transformed into a space with walls and dredged to make a theater, like a Greek theater maybe, in the middle of the bay, where you could see beautiful stars at night with maybe a symphony, maybe even Amazonia of Villa-Lobos. This is the square plaza that you can see because of the intense transit of traffic of airports. We can see It's not, this is not only nature per se. It must be a man's work. This is the Brazilian Museum of Sculpture, and it's not only, although it's just a simple building for one purpose. It is a museum for sculpture. But I imagine I could say that it seems to an architect that when you mention a sculpture, a museum of sculpture, like the fundamental museum, because as it is a sculpture museum, sculpture in an open-air space is very important, because we have so many examples of sculptures that, if we're not in an open-air space, would not be so relevant. So architects sometimes create problems for themselves. So I don't believe that some walls that we have in many territories, that those are actually necessary, not even for a country, a colonized country. It has a repressive idea, in any way you want to put it. And if this avenue where this museum is situated, is a corner of Alemanha Street that goes down for about 4 meters, if 100 meters in the front part of the plot, and the entrance of the museum is underground compared to the level of the street. In other words, we made the closed part of the museum in an underground space, and the exhibition part on top. And so the space as a whole is very interesting. And after it was built, this would make people say, well, there's no museum here. This is just a hole in the land. It's a hiding place. And this is the joy to stimulate artwork. So I imagined that these pieces as instruments could come up as assessment and measurement, which is here shown on the sketch. If it's a sculpture, big or small, or where it is positioned, that makes this instrument, which is a beam, a vertical beam, a horizontal beam, serves as a meter to where to put the sculptures in terms of height, in terms of distance of the axis X or Y, or also where to put the sculpture in terms of X or Y axis. So the height is about 2 meters high, and that is the height of my house. So people will have the ability to comprehend the height of a certain sculpture, because that would be similar to the height of their houses. It is in direction of a street that comes from the north, called Portugal Street. And in terms of the other axis, it is perpendicular to Europa Avenue. And that is where this fundamental piece to understand and to see this museum that is there, apparently invisible. So then we have this part that provides shades with 20-meter pavilions, 3 of them for the construction to be more simple. 20 meters is easy to overcome, theoretically. but 20 meters is very comfortable for exposed concrete, and a pavilion of 20 per 50 is very good for exhibits. And that's how we made this museum. On the corner of Europe Avenue and Alemanha Street, here we have an inflection of this street, and there's a variable in the pavilions of 20 meters to be able to do this corner as in the form of a trumpet, to make a little musical analogy, where we have the auditorium in the museum plan. So the size of it was determined by the businessmen that promoted all this project, because of the money, the funds that they wanted to invest. And as we know, in general, in any place that we are, we know more or less how much the square meter will cost. So we had a horizon to be able to ask and to know how big this construction would be. And this was a very fundamental matter that we treated since the beginning. And this is the way we presented it. And it's important to remember, for those who like gardens, we asked a garden to be done by my friend Roberto Burlemark, and we have been very friends for a long time, and that is how the museum was done. These are the cuts, and of course this beam ended up having 70 meters per 12 transversally. Of course, it's not, it's made of shells, internal shells that are not, but they are on walls, and they're separated from the other walls because this museum is underground. So with this new figure, we reached a different configuration of the streets that are there, that date back to the 20s. But also with excavations of the underground, we touched something that was there for millions of years. And all of that is very significant in the perspective of transforming the place, which is a constant of what we should do in an American territory that was so recently discovered through navigation, and to which the contribution of England has been very important, and also Portugal's contribution was fundamental. Here are some pictures of all of the museum. So the entrance, you cannot imagine that anything is underground. If someone passes by, they see just this part. So it's a new occupation of space that this museum is formed. And then we have the last project that I did that was quite a significant importance, and was very important to me as a Brazilian, because it was an invitation, not a competition, from the Portuguese government, which made me a bit anxious, because I didn't know if I should accept this project, because the first contacts were very reserved, and I said, well, I'll go over and see it. And when I got there, I said, I will only do this museum if there is a local collaboration due to laws and influences, because it is a museum that is the most visited in Lisbon, called the Coach Museum, the Museum of Coaches, and it is a very touristic place and attracts thousands of tourists. And it's close to the Jeronim convent near the Billing Tower. And that is where the 3 boats, ships left that are said to have discovered Brazil. And I think they probably did, because we have never had any news that had happened before. But of course, in a colonial policy, which reminds us of the great destructions of a culture that was very strong and existed in the Pacific, and that was destroyed. But that is very vast to comment here in this occasion, but it is a part of all this huge adventure of the construction of the spaces of America. So to make this museum, the space was very peculiar in the front of the museum. We have the Tejo River, and we wanted to transform the place to make it more valuable, in a sense, make it richer and more joyful. And this whole region is very visited by a lot of people. The square of the governor of the Western Islands. And it's good to remind, especially the young people, that some people don't know, most of us don't know, what to do. What is a museum of coaches, of carriages? What do we do with these objects that are sculpted with mermaids and revested with gold? It's fantastic. Stupendous. And we tried not to create any scenery, but to expose this treasure that is something that is absolutely fantastic in these big white halls, so that they can be highlighted. Of course, you can't put a horse in a museum, but avoiding any idea of scenario, but to expose this treasure, the object itself, in a closed place with, of course, with the right climate for it not to be deteriorated. So we did this pavilion, and from the ground, so that, and it had to be necessarily big, so we made it so it did not block the landscape, but in a way that it would flow in a very interesting way, because I said on the occasion that I would only do this with the support of Portugal. And this was done through the engineer Rui Furtado, and especially at the end of the matter, the zoological part with Nunes Sampaio, and they accepted my invitation. And going back to the beginning of my explanation about the Museum of Coaches, that only this way would I accept the project, and they gave me much support, and that way we were able to execute this beautiful project. So the museum has an exhibition part, and everything that is the management and variables that had to flow in this plant with rooms and smaller rooms, we put in an annex room, because there was an irregularity in the land, in the corner of the two back streets, where we fix this idea of an annex building, because an annex in architecture is a very strong idea. We all know that the baptistery is an annex, for example. Neymar made one for the Moldadori, because the annex has because from the annex you only see, from the window of the annex you only see something else. So it's always something else. And the annex, you see yourself, it's a dialogue that architecture is able to establish. And it's very convenient, this idea of the annex. So we made this annex with the very high height. And this was to expose these beautiful gold artifacts, the coaches, against this these white walls with 10 meters high. So the walls become a wonderful beam, especially if you imagine a metallical grid. So you could make this 20 meters transversal space. You could make many pavilions with 20 by 150, but it's very delicate matter to do this, and this suspension off the ground is amazing. And then from the annex to the other building, we made a footbridge.
And through this bridge, you had all employees in the museum going through the annex to the main building to open up for all visitors to show trains, carriages, and these engines. Therefore, visitors, they enter the building through 2 large lifts, hosting up to 75 people each one, 115 total, creating for this engine, this virtuous machine, which is the lift, being used in a virtuous way in order to enable it to control the number of people in the museum, and doors they open up for those who are coming in or coming out. So the lift is always open, because you open towards one side and enter towards a different side. And we can see all the features we can use with the lift, especially the control with a very large, very visited museum. This is very important. The museum has a controlled number of people that can only visit. So they need to make sure they have the right number of people, and they can do that quite easily through the lifts. So it's not just a simple lift, it's a means to resolve access, raising from the floor. And all workshops are located on the ground floor. You can see them through the glass panels, and there are maintenance workshops and fixing workshops as well. And we have what we call crystal pavilion, crystal hall, where the lifts are. And apart from that, you've got all these empty areas. And what's very interesting is that the government wants another bridge from the railway through the bank of Tejo River towards the bank at the front of the river, where there's a river harbor, and it's not simply separated development, but we wanted to connect the museum as well. And this footbridge, which would be 7 meters high, would be developed within from the annex, and halfway through the way you can see the auditorium, and so on and so forth. And here you can see this connection of the footbridge between the annex and the museum. Further back, we have this sculpture of the vice king of the Indies, the Western Indies. And here you can see this internal passage. This is the annex where we placed the back office, restaurant, auditorium, a school for children. And we created a very peculiar structure, and my colleagues have collaborated very well with me, especially Rui Furtado. He is a very interesting person, not just from the engineering perspective, and the roof with natural light, and the auditorium, we've got a water mirror in order to show, pay a respect for Tejo River. So this is all I had to say for today. And once again, I remind all of you that for me and to all of us, I'm very honored, I'm very happy to be here in London, in the UK, to Brazilian people, Portuguese people. It was the English ships that brought the king and the queen from Portugal to build the first form of government in Brazil for this adventure called the South Americas with John VI, the King of Portugal, and later on building harbors, railway. So these people, the English people, they were very fundamental. They contributed to build Brazil. So England was very important to us. Thank you very much indeed.
Muito obrigado. Thank you, Paulo, for that brilliant lecture. It's been a great pleasure to hear you speak, and I look forward to presenting you tomorrow evening with the Royal Gold Medal on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation once more to our wonderful Royal Gold Medalist, Paulo Mendes da Rocha. Thank you very much to the team behind tonight's event. And also thank you very much to our main sponsors, ARPA, to our exclusive technology partner, Microsoft, and to our hotel partner, Le Méridien, and to our champagne partner, Tettinger. Thank you also to Ibstock Brick for supporting our Life by Design series. Without your kind and generous support, tonight's event and our program of activity around the country would not have been possible. Please now do join me and our medalist for drinks, which are being served upstairs in the Florence Hall on the first floor. But before you leave, please can I ask you to leave your headset on your chair or hand it to a member of our team. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.